Hi guys, my name is Candice Cuoco, and today we're going to learn how to make 1 to 2 time use medical masks. These are purely for the sake of donating to your local hospital or medical facility. As everyone knows right now with COVID-19, a lot of the hospitals are overwhelmed and their medical supplies are limited to none. I get a lot of questions about if masks made at home are acceptable and according to the CDC when other items and other medical supplies are limited, which they are, they're strained. These masks that are made at home, cloth masks, any masks are acceptable. So I'm going to teach you today how to make masks and where to donate them. For this project, I'm going to go through a list of materials that are absolutely necessary and some that are optional. Also materials in case you don't have certain things that you can replace them with. First thing we're going to do is prep our fabric. So I'm going to use a marker so it's incredibly visible, but I suggest you using a pencil. That's totally fine. We are just going to measure out our 6, I try to waste as little as possible, 6 by 9 inch rectangle. So that's our 6 by 9 inch rectangle. And what I like to do to save time is I take my rectangle, I fold it. Pin your square. You don't have to. Pin your rectangle. It's not a square, it's a rectangle. Pin your rectangle. Two 6 by 9 rectangles, not squares. And then what we're going to do, for those of you who don't have elastic or cords, what you can do is you can just take muslin tears. So normally I would just mark 1 inch by 22 inches. What I would do, muslin tears straight. So I would just tear and cut, but a lot of you are going to be using different materials. So you're going to take a straight edge with your ruler. If it's a measuring tape, you can use something else. You're going to mark 22 inches here, straight line. We're going to do another one right next to it. We're going to cut these out. Cuts are normally wonky. Don't feel bad about it because we're going to fold these in. You're not even going to see the edges. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can make these later. So now we have our fabric and our strips, if that's what you guys are using, and if you guys do not have elastic or cording. And now we're going to stitch them. So now we've cut our fabric. We have our 2 6 by 9 inch rectangles, not squares. What we're going to do, if you have a pattern or whatnot, the outside of your fabric, let's say this is the outside of my fabric. It's a little bit difficult when you're dealing with muslin. Both sides are inside outside. So we're going to take the outsides of your fabric and we're going to put them in. So we call this right side, wrong side. This is the outside that you're eventually going to see. This is the inside that you will not see. We're going to put those together. I don't like to pin. A lot of people feel a lot better about pinning. So we're going to pin 2 sides, make sure they're within the rectangle. Clear your station because you don't want to start sewing things that you don't need to. And we're going to put it under our presser foot. Before we get there, I want to make sure that we have a 2.5 stitch width length. So on your home sewing machine, there should be some kind of dial and you're going to do at 2.5. That's between 2 and 3. What we're gonna do is we're gonna stitch at a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. My machine has a 1/4 of an inch marker. It's right here. If yours does not, what you can do is you can set your ruler inside a 1/4 of an inch from where the needle would go down. That's my 1/4 of an inch mark. 1/4 of an inch in, and you'll see it falls right there. And what we're gonna do is take our marker and we're just gonna make a line where that 1/4 of an inch is. Okay, we're gonna start stitching at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You wanna back stitch. Pinned fabric is okay. For those of you who just like to hold your fabric in place, that's totally fine. These are 1 to 2 time use masks, and then they will be tossed. These are not fashion masks. They just need to serve their purpose. There you have it, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take that, stick your hand in it, flip. Now you have the right side on the outside and the wrong side on the inside. So you have your seams on the inside and the right side of the fabric on the outside. You're gonna press that down, almost like the seams at each edge, and you're gonna take it to your iron. If you have an iron available. If not, just firmly press this down. If there's no iron available, just firmly press the edges. If you do have an iron, go ahead and steam the outside edges of your 9-inch sides with steam. You have a perfectly pressed mask. Now we're going to apply the measurements for the pleats, but first I'm going to clean up this edge. It's something that you can do if it gets in your way. If not, for the sake of time and these being able to be cranked out as fast as possible, you don't have to. So take your ruler, and what you're going to do, again, you can use your pencil. I would not recommend using a marker, but for the sake of this, I'm going to use a Sharpie. You're going to, from one end of the seam, go 1 1/4 inches. So 1 1/4 inches up, and you're gonna make a notch. So you can either snip there or you can make a mark with a pencil. From that 1 1/4 inches, you're gonna go 1 inch. You're gonna do 1 more inch and you're gonna make a notch. From this edge, you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna go 1 1/4 inches. And then from that edge, you're gonna do 1 inch. You're gonna make another notch. And you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. The reason why we're doing this is because we're going to take from the bottom to the top. You're gonna take this and you're gonna match this notch that you made to the next notch. Just like that. For those of you who do like to pin, you can pin this so you do not lose your place. You're gonna do it again. This notch to this notch. So on this side, we're gonna match it, and you'll notice that the fold just kind of wants to follow itself. So you're gonna go notch to notch. So if you're wondering which way do I go on this side's going to kind of remind you. For the sake of stitching, you're gonna wanna pin in a little bit further. So pin in at least 1/2 inch to 1 inch in, because it's gonna give you room when you're stitching so that you don't run over your pins. Again, notch to notch. See, notch to notch, and it's gonna fold in the same direction. All your pleats are gonna go in the same direction. The sake of pleats is for it to adjust. So smaller face, larger face. So while it's on, it will adjust and it'll contour to my face. Now we're gonna go into stitching our pleats down, and we're gonna still stitch out a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Put it under your machine, back stitch, and stitch all the way through. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you don't pin correctly, sometimes your pins can get in the way, but that's okay. Just take them out, straight over that. Back stitch. We're gonna flip to the other side. This is the side that we properly pinned. You can see I don't have to take any of my pins out because I pinned properly. And there you have it. This is 24 gauge. It's extremely easy to work with. The top of the mask is where the folds fold up. So as you're facing me, so facing you, this is the top of the mask. Folds are facing up in that direction. What we're gonna do is we're gonna measure out 8.5 inches. You're gonna bend that. You're gonna unroll to the other 8.5 inches, keeping this blunt end. Don't cut this blunt end. We're gonna feed it through and I'm gonna show you why in just a second. Cut out 8.5 inches. You can use normal paper scissors if you don't have wire cutters. This cuts fairly easy. Don't use your fabric scissors. You're gonna take that wire and you're going to take the two pieces and you're just going to nicely wind, not too tight, nothing serious. You're just gonna wind it. We're going to take our mask and we're gonna bring it to the machine, clear your space. And with the folds facing into the machine, we're going to stitch the top again at 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do the other side as well if you'd like. We're gonna take the blunt end, we're going to insert it inside the seam at the top. Remember, folds facing up. I'm just gonna insert that. Now that our wire is in, the reason why I had you measure out 8.5 inches is because it left you 1/4 inch on each side, and we're gonna lock that wire in on both sides. That's my son in the background. If you're doing this at home, you most likely have the same background noise. I'm gonna lock that in at 1/4 inch on both sides. So we're gonna move into option 1 as far as straps, closures, ties. This is going to be the elastic option if you have elastic available, but I'm also gonna teach you 2 other options in case you don't have elastic laying around, which I know a lot of us do not. So we wanna take our elastic and we're going to move it to the bottom of the mask and to the outside edge of the seam allowance, right there. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna pin that in place. You're gonna pin that in place far away from where you're gonna stitch, which is going to be the same line that you stitched before. You're gonna take this end and you're gonna loop it to the other side, still facing out, still at the bottom. You're gonna take your other piece of elastic and you're gonna do the same exact thing. Now we're going to lock down our elastic pieces in place. Like I was mentioning before, you're gonna stitch right where your first existing line was. Back stitch. Remove all of your pins. Now what you have is perfectly stitched in elastic loops. So we've gotten this far with the mask. At this point, this is acceptable. This is something that's a nurse or someone in the medical field can wear. It's usable. They can get a few uses out of it, and then they're most likely going to toss it for germ's sake. At this point, this is acceptable. I'm going to show you how to take it a little bit further if that's something that you'd like to do and clean it up a little bit if you have the time, but if not, this is somewhere you can stop. To take this mask a few steps further, what we can do is we can clean up the edges, fold them in, and we can also stitch down the top and the bottom so the fabric doesn't shift while the wearer is wearing it or while it's in use. So we have this side. We're going to clean up these little threads. And what you want to do is take your edge and fold it in towards the inside. So let me show you again. This is the outside. We're going to take this edge and we're going to fold it in. So I like to flip it so I can see. I'm just going to fold it in. And if you don't like the way that looks, you can fold it in one more time. Fold that edge in. fold that in one more time. So you now have this clean inside of the mask. I'm going to put it under the machine. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Remove the needle. Make sure it's really in there. And you're going to backstitch. You guys see my machine backstitch by itself. I'm working on a Jack single needle machine, and it comes with these automatic features. I can put the link in the video for you guys interested. Just going to stitch 1/4 inch down this line. You want to make sure that that's really tucked in. If it gets caught, just lift your foot. Keep going. So you just did the seam, and so the elastic works properly. You're going to just push it forward, the outside. I'm going to put it back under there, and you're just going to secure that strap down. Just one little stitch is fine. For those of you who do not want to roll the seam for the sake of time and getting these out quickly, what you can do is just roll this in and simply stitch that down. Do one more stitch. I'm going to stitch that seam down. And that works just as fine as the other side. Option 2, for those of you who don't have elastic laying around, you just simply need 2 cords, 2 laces, shoelaces, some type of string. There's my dog. I'm actually working in the comfort of my own home. Gotta, do what you gotta do. Okay, so we're going to have 2 pieces of string, cord, whatever it is that you have. I'm going to show you how to stitch this in, option number 2. We're going to take the mask and 1 cord, and what we're going to do is from the wrong side of the mask, we're going to take your cord, stretch it if it has some stretching capabilities. If not, you're going to place it in the mask, and you're going to fold this end about 3/4 inch in, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in, depending on how comfortable you are with stitching this casing and not catching the string. The idea is to stitch this down without catching the string. If you feel more comfortable, what you can do is you can also pin this in the center and then drag this back and forth so you know that you're not catching anything. And you're going to take this and you're going to move it underneath your presser foot. And again, at 1/4 inch from this edge, you're going to stitch 1/4 inch. As you start stitching, you want to remove that pin. You want to keep going. These are not fashion masks. You just want to make them useful. So now I have my cord and it moves. What this allows it to do is to bunch in, bunch out. It's adjustable. It can be tied behind the ear like this, or when you stitch in the other side, it could be tied behind the head, at the neck and at the back of the head. Now for our third option, as far as closures, if you do not have elastic laying around, if you don't have 2 cords, you can take 2 strips of the fabric that you're using and you can simply sew them onto each side of your mask. And what you're going to want to do is take 1 strip, you're going to fold it in half, have that piece, and you're going to fold your whole strip in half again. And you can press this with your iron if you'd like, or you can just do it by hand. So here's the halfway mark, and I'm going to take my mask and I'm going to line it up with the outside. So the outside edge of my strip with the outside edge in the center of my mask, like this. I'm gonna place it down right there. Half of the strip is out that way, the other half is this way, and I'm going to stitch this down. We're going to take this strip and we're going to start at the top of the mask. Remember, outside edge to outside edge, so raw, raw. And we're gonna stitch this at 1/4 of an inch from top to the bottom of the mask. When we're done with that, we're going to drag this down to the top of the tie. If you like, this is an option. And you're just going to close this string, 1/4 of an inch. And you're going to just close it. And you can keep that going to the other side. 1/4 of an inch, make sure you're adjusting that it's in half. I'm just gonna keep going. Now we're gonna repeat the process. What we're gonna do is we're going to take this and we're going to flip the raw edge inside. So it looks like this, and you're just gonna stitch it down. 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. We're gonna do the same thing to the other side. We're gonna flip the raw edge in, like so. Make sure that raw edge is flipped in. So it's flipped in. You can see here it's flipped in. And we're gonna do 1/4 of an inch. There you have your mask. So now we have our mask that is adjustable. We have the wire at the top with strings that we can then put on our face. And again, this is not a fashion mask. The stitching is not beautiful. It's going to be used once or twice, and it's going to be tossed. I'm going to tie this down. This is the mask with the wire on the inside. So what this allows me to do is get it behind my ears and form the wire to my face. So it's malleable and it's tight. It hugs the bottom of my chin and the top of my face. Is it beautiful? No. Does it work? Yes. So there you have it, guys. 3 different masks, 3 different strap options. Whatever you have available, by all means use it. One with wire, other ones without. Whatever you have in your home that you feel like you can donate will help. In this whole entire pandemic, feeling helpless, some people have anxiety, the best thing you can do is put your hands on something and create. At the end of everything, when it's all said and done, you're gonna feel like you really helped and did something. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, by all means, email us, DM us, wherever you saw this, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Send us a question and we'll be happy to answer. And don't forget, when you're creating these, make sure that you sanitize your station as much as possible. Wash your hands, and thank you so much for giving back. Bye.